Today, I want to look at how Trump and his allies screwed up their strategy in trying to end democracy as we know it when they assumed power last year.
Sometimes you need a dictator.
With a supine Congress.
I run the protection program. I'll take care of you.
And a Supreme Court showing near continuous deference.
Thank you again. Thank you again. Won't forget. So good.
They have managed to do a shocking amount of harm since January 2025.
Hundreds of thousands of global deaths, possibly millions.
But they got one thing.
Nobody expected that.
What might turn out to be the most important thing.
We were shocked.
Wrong.
Nobody can believe it.
After Donald Trump was first elected in 2016, administration officials came in, guns blazing, to block Muslims from entering the country and aiming to get as many immigrants, or at least the brown-skinned ones, as possible out of the country as soon as they could get away with it. Resistance was quick out of the gate.
In fact, so many people showed up, the protests had to move outside.
Some of those looking to build institutional power for themselves or for the Republican Party, that includes some key officials as well as the courts, didn't always buy Trump's argument.
All of us who are seeing these images of children being pulled away from moms and dads in tears, we're horrified. This has to stop.
More importantly, there was real revulsion from everyday Americans over the family separation policy in particular.
I am very vehemently against family separation. And the separation of parents and children.
The second time Trump ran.
In 2016, I declared, I am your voice. Today I add, I am your warrior. I am your justice.
He seemed to want to build support for what he hadn't been able to get away with before.
I am your retribution. I am your retribution.
And so he ran specifically and openly on bellicose racism and foreigner bashing.
They're not humans, they're animals.
Spreading calumny about refugees.
We have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime.
And lashing out at Haitians in particular.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
The mass deportation now placards at the Republican National Convention.
You may wonder, is that where the Republican Party is today?
For the last presidential election were horrific.
The answer is absolutely yes.
And although he just squeaked by, he pretended he'd won in a landslide.
There are several of the wealthiest men in America lined up right behind the president while he's taking his inaugural oath.
When he returned to the presidency in January 2025, he took government by storm.
Seems like it happened in another universe, but there it is, just over a year ago. Directing the slashing of jobs and programs throughout the federal government.
He smashed and dismantled much of the functioning federal apparatus.
To add insult to injury, at the end of the day, DOGE likely cost taxpayers $135 billion due to paid leave for federal workers, lost productivity, and the costs of rehiring mistakenly fired workers.
While seeking vastly larger amounts of money for armed forces that were loyal to him.
He sees it as a way to bribe the officers, as a way to bribe the soldiers, such that when he tries to stay in power forever as some kind of military dictator, they will be on his side.
With a special focus on immigration law enforcement.
You will see ICE now being the single largest federal law enforcement agency in the history of the nation, potentially with enough funding to hire more law enforcement agents than the FBI and more detention potentially than the entire Federal Bureau of Prisons.
The government started a secret police effort run like a brutal but clumsy military crackdown on immigrants nationwide.
Chaos and clashes on the streets of U.S. cities amid intensifying ICE raids.
Yo, chill! Get out of here, man. She's not even doing anything.
They either thought they had already intimidated their opposition, that they could shut it down easily if dissent appeared, or perhaps that they just thought not enough people would care to make a difference.
Have some of these raids gone too far?
No, I think they haven't gone far enough.
And they found out that none of the above were true.
Millions hit the streets on Saturday for the third time in less than a year.
They got out over their skis in trying to do a massive expansion of concentration camps and put target groups in them before they had shut down their political opposition.
It begins with one frog who refuses to bend the knee.
They have since found that that approach can't succeed in the country at this time.
Who dares to say, no kings, no crowns, not here, not ever.
So today, I want to talk about what's happening right now, why it's the most dangerous moment for us in decades, and how Trump's allies are trying to course correct, clamp down on dissent as they run out of time to make sure that Trumpist violence and the current attempt to undo civil rights achievements and human rights in the U.S. won't end in 2028. I've been saying now for more than a year that the administration has overshot what it could get away with for now.
You almost have to feel sorry for him. He did his best to cancel me. Instead, he forced millions of people to watch the show. That backfired bigly.
In order to entrench concentration camps in society in such a way that they eclipse the legal system, typically there are opponents and there are scapegoats.
The dictatorship started right after Lenin's companions took power in October 1917.
Authoritarians are able to rise to power by using propaganda relentlessly against the scapegoats they've targeted.
The Bolsheviks are a minority in such a huge country, and so they begin early on to use violence and coercion to strengthen their domination.
But their main obstacle in their political rule is their opposition.
Lenin believes that power can't be shared. The repression is based on the conviction that the new regime has the right to remove mercilessly all its opponents, called enemies of the people.
Sometimes they crush the opposition immediately before coming to power or in the midst of seizing it, such as a coup.
In order to implement such terror, the Bolshevik government created in December 1917 the Cheka. The Cheka, which means Extraordinary Commission, is the party's sword and shield and exists and acts beyond the law.
Just as often, they suppress dissent soon after taking power.
It's a state within the state, with its own network of informers, special troops, and intelligence services. In short, a political police of more than 200,000 people.
But traditionally, they have to end the broad ability to publicly dissent in order to establish the capacity to round people up at will.
Following an attack against Lenin on the 30th of August 1918 by an anarchist, the Cheka is in charge of implementing the Red Terror. The number of victims of the Red Terror of autumn 1918 is estimated to be between 10,000 and 15,000 people.
But when Trump came back to power this time, the U.S. had already learned to tolerate roundups of a group of people the larger population had acclimated to being removed from society and even from the country.
Look, under President Obama, I was the head of enforcement removal operations. When I was there, we oversaw the removal of just shy of 3 million illegal aliens.
It was already acceptable to target immigrants for violence.
Now I'm the border czar under President Trump. I have a direct report to the president.
So they charged ahead and upped the ante, turning targeted arrests into mass operations to terrorize immigrant communities outside churches, in hospitals, or even for people showing up to court-mandated hearings.
The overwhelming force and heavily armed agents storming workplaces, I think that's a really new and kind of uncharted territory.
Masked men seize adults, pregnant women, children. But this was unusual in the history of concentration camps.
The vast majority of the amendments in the Bill of Rights are being trampled right now in Minnesota.
When there is a coup or an immediate collapse into civil war after an authoritarian seizure of power, the mass detention will sometimes begin overnight.
The First Amendment includes the right of freedom of speech.
But outside of those examples, when a country wants to present itself as the continuity of steadiness and law and order authority,
the Second Amendment gives people the right to possess firearms consistent with state and local laws. Alex Preddy was doing that.
The era of street sweeps in broad daylight tends to take place well after an initial period of entrenchment.
This is a critical moment for the Second Amendment community, for the people who are honestly motivated by the right of self-defense and not crazy extremist stuff, but honestly motivated by that, to come together with the First Amendment community, with the ACLU, with the civil rights community, to stand up for American rights across the board.
And as I've said on here before, even the Nazis took 5 years before launching mass arrests of German Jews that targeted whole communities.
While his supporters formed paramilitary groups and fought protesters in the streets, Hitler raised fears of a communist uprising and argued that only he could restore law and order.
They spent the first 2 years of the Third Reich solidifying their political power, establishing a dictatorship, and sending their political opponents into exile, camps, or an early grave.
Dachau was established by Heinrich Himmler March 21st, 1933, an entire 6 years before the start of World War II. In the times before the war, the prisoners consisted mainly of the German people, enemies of the regime, along with the clergy and Jews.
After seizing power in 1917, the Bolsheviks in Russia likewise had to seal military control of Russia.
During the summer of 1918, the first concentration camps, called Konzlager, a name derived from German, are created. They are here to protect the Soviet Republic against its so-called enemies.
And spend years after that war had ended squashing their political opposition before the Gulag could be established and entrenched, holding anyone they wanted to round up.
The concentration camps are managed by the Cheka and gather people that have been arbitrarily arrested because they belong to a category the regime didn't like: upper class, nobles, social dangerous elements.
All of this is not to suggest that the Trump administration ignored dissent entirely in the year and a half since January 2025. That would not be true at all.
Attorney General Pam Bondi's ordered the FBI to compile a list of what the Justice Department is calling domestic terrorist organizations.
But officials seem to think that they could make terrorizing immigrants and mass detention on the basis of ethnicity their main focus, while conducting more of a drive-by attack on those speaking up about ICE detention.
Amid the protests, the masked and heavily armed federal agents, sometimes backed by the military, had also arrested hundreds of U.S. citizens, routinely portraying them as domestic terrorists or extremists.
They tried to do this through haphazard cases against protesters that would make it clear that anyone who registered their objections to mass roundups, the denial of due process, and concentration camps for immigrants would wind up targeted too.
With my colleagues at ProPublica and Frontline, we analyzed the arrests of more than 300 protesters and bystanders caught in the crackdown. While there have been some successful prosecutions, over and over, cases have been falling apart, contradicted by video evidence and witness testimony.
How did this happen? I think it was because you kind of have a split camp in the Trump administration. In the second administration, you have amoral con men, grifters, and you also have the profoundly racist white supremacists.
You have a right to want a country that is of, by, and for Americans and only Americans.
To be clear, several officials belong to both categories, including the president himself.
We know that Trump is falling asleep at meetings and barely there.
But at the next level down from Trump, one priority or the other tends to dominate.
There's somebody who is actually calling all the shots here, and his name is Stephen Miller.
As an ideologue, Stephen Miller's priority is the racist and ethnic purging of the country.
Am I the only one who is sick and tired of being told to pick up my trash? We have plenty of janitors.
While J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio seem to me to both be mercenaries without any real ideology.
The vice president's involved in everything, and he's been great, and Marco has been really, I think you're born for this job.
They seem more interested in accumulating political power, a long-term authoritarian project.
What I worry about is when people say you can't ever do immigration enforcement if it produces a bad video clip, what they're really saying is you can't ever actually do immigration enforcement.
In both cases, the end vision is similar, but how to get there is different.
I don't think you should ever run for another office. I don't think you should, really. You're so good at this. He is so good, and everybody likes him.
While they seek to maximize political power, the mercenaries often encourage using legal tools and couching their true ambitions.
The New York Times is reporting Vice President J.D. Vance wanted to use the Insurrection Act to respond to escalating ICE protests in Minneapolis last January. That would have allowed the federal government to use the military against demonstrators.
The true believers, on the other hand, say exactly what they mean, and they're ready to spend all their political capital today, foaming at the mouth and leaning directly into the violence of their project.
He believes that the presence of undocumented immigrants in this country, and really of anyone who doesn't conform to his image of Americans, is an urgent, immediate threat on a par with 9/11 or Pearl Harbor.
Coming out of the gate on the second Trump administration, the Ideologues won.
These people chose to invade us.
Think of Stephen Miller and Gregory Bovino, the chief Border Patrol agent who led and encouraged so much violence in Chicago and Minneapolis before being pushed out.
Bovino defended the officer who killed her.
A 4,000-pound missile is not something anyone wants to face, especially in a split-second decision-making process in a very already inhospitable environment. Hats off to that ICE agent.
But resistance rose too quickly and too steeply in the face of the Ideologues' operations.
This past winter, federal troops brought death and terror to the streets of Minneapolis. Well, they picked the wrong city.
Shootings and assassinations of U.S. citizens on the street as part of a deliberately violent project carried out by immigration enforcement agents shocked the country. And Americans pushed back publicly.
Shot in the back and left to die in the street without even the decency of our lawless government investigating their deaths.
And when the move came to expedite the expansion of detention by co-opting existing warehouses,
less than 1 week after the purchase of this massive warehouse was formally announced, hundreds of Salt Lake individuals showing up to show out and give their opinions about what they think about this deal.
Everyday people also pushed back tremendously against the plan to put the next deco in their backyard.
The agency plans to offload several warehouses. The reporter of the story posted on X the locations, some in Michigan, Georgia, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and the one in Salt Lake City. Lower-level courts have been backing immigrant rights in many cases during the second Trump administration, demanding due process.
Another move making headlines, a federal judge blocking ICE arrests at immigration court hearings.
And in the wake of brutal policies and the economic effects of an inane war launched on Iran, Donald Trump has also become phenomenally unpopular, which further fuels dissent.
Some angry fans posting, "Trump cursed the Knicks," sharing video of the president appearing to nod off during the game.
As a result, the Ideologues have lost some of their control over the current priorities for the Trump administration. They have been forced to recalibrate. It's clear that the administration moved too quickly, thinking that political victory meant a majority of U.S. citizens were somehow behind their platform of hate and violence. They seem to be realizing that they overshot their mark. They've been trying to prosecute people from the beginning, of course.
NSPM 7 directs the FBI to go through its past half decade or so of intelligence on Antifa and on some of these other groups I've been talking about, and tells them to make criminal cases around those and to circulate intelligence about it.
Think of the arrest of Newark, New Jersey Mayor Ras Baraka at Delaney Hall in May 2025.
Newark Mayor Ras Baraka is calling for the immediate closure of the private immigration detention facility.
Think of the Broadview 6 in Chicago, who were charged over a demonstration last September.
Yeah, the Broadview 6 is really the most egregious example of misconduct by the U.S. Attorney's Office that we've seen in terms of the misconduct in front of the grand jury.
Then, of course, there's the sandwich guy from last August.
He's become a symbol for some of D.C.'s resistance to federal law enforcement in the city.
But even those prosecutions were too ambitious.
About an hour ago, a jury found the man known as D.C.'s sandwich guy not guilty of a misdemeanor assault.
They haven't yet sealed a dictatorship in any way that would let them jail, for instance, elected officials over free speech. And with the guy charged over throwing a sandwich, the prosecution was neither valid nor strategic.
I am so happy that
justice prevails in spite of everything happening.
Even bringing the case made them look like idiots and would not help them going forward.
And that night, I believe that I was protecting the rights of immigrants.
There are no brigades of people throwing sandwiches. But some other attempts at prosecution undertaken in the same window have been more targeted, more successful, and more dangerous.
We end today's show with President Trump's escalating crackdown on First Amendment rights.
3 Spokane, Washington protesters who were alleged to have blocked a bus transferring immigrant detainees.
There was a Facebook post by the former president of the Spokane City Council about 2 Venezuelan migrants who were going to be, according to him, unlawfully deported.
Were convicted of conspiracy and are awaiting sentencing with possible jail sentences of up to 6 years and fines of $250,000.
The federal judge ended up freeing one of those migrants, saying his arrest was unconstitutional. A number of demonstrators showed up. Bajan was one of them. He went home. He was going about his life, and then a month later the FBI showed up at his door and a number of other demonstrators and arrested them for conspiracy.
And when some protesters turned to vandalism and one fired a weapon after a policeman drew a gun last year, several others, at least some of whom had left the scene earlier when told to disperse, were charged with material support for terrorism in Texas over their production of zines.
A group of protesters received unusually long sentences after the Justice Department accused them of being members of the far-left movement Antifa.
Sentences of 30 to 100 years were handed down last week.
Longer than the harshest sentence handed down to any of the convicted rioters in the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol in 2021.
Targeting those who make zines is a much greater threat than those who throw sandwiches. Working to try to link nonviolent protesters legally to those who commit violence is a much more strategic approach to suppressing dissent. Sympathetic judges giving maximum sentences along with lectures about eradicating free speech. I expect we're going to see more of that. We're seeing a broader attempt at intimidation as well. Trump has launched a campaign against the supposed saboteurs of the reflecting pool on the National Mall, claiming citations and arrests.
If anyone attacks any of them, they get as much as 10 years in jail.
Though it seems clear that the bulk and perhaps the entirety of the damage to the pool was inflicted by the very contractor that Trump had hired.
We've never done a pool, but the water is relatively the same as the water that you would see out in a regular lake somewhere, right?
And earlier this week, we learned about a father recently stalked, more or less, by the FBI and tracked down at a hotel over an angry letter he had sent in January that threatened no violence.
She said, "Why are you looking for my husband?" And the agent said, he may or may not have sent an email threatening the director of ICE.
Poll worker Paige-Lynn Gania in Minnesota found herself ordered to take down a 5-month-old Instagram post on social media criticizing the killing of Renee Good and naming her shooter.
They told me if I didn't take it down, I could face state and federal prosecution. I'm leaving it up because I am firm on my right of free speech. And what they are claiming I did does not fall under the definition of doxing.
To be clear, when I talk about this shift of emphasis toward public intimidation of protesters by the federal government, I'm not talking about something entirely coordinated. It's partly intentional, as with some prosecutions and certainly as with the removal of Bovino.
The U.S. Border Patrol Commander at large has been demoted amid the fallout.
Greg Bovino would quickly be dismissed.
It's also that goals for some people, such as prosecutors, begin to shift when those early efforts fail. And it's partly that authoritarian systems develop their own momentum as they manage to further degrade democracy and coalesce. We've seen an example of the latter with censorship increasing in the U.S. Major news institutions, one after the other, have been bought and gutted or diminished by owners who now pay fealty to Trump.
The most prestigious
Television journalists in the country who work all for 60 Minutes are coming out and saying there was bias that they were trying to inject behind the scenes on my show, and that is why I have to get out of here.
More and more people get their news from social media, which is also predominantly owned by Trump allies and backers. Algorithms downplay political or anti-administration content. And at legacy outlets, stories honestly describing what is happening in the country are harder and harder to get produced or printed. So going forward, I expect to see a more aggressive assault on free speech overall, and particularly charges involving any ties to physical presence at demonstrations and protests.
A show of support outside federal court today, while inside more than a dozen people pleaded not guilty to federal charges. They're accused of conspiring to violently oppose law enforcement during the ICE surge.
Those who want to stand up for their rights will need to be more careful about protecting themselves and one another.
If you read the charges that people are receiving, then you're going to have to arrest all of us, because we've all kind of done some of these things in support of our community.
My sense is that in the midst of war and rising economic chaos, it is too late for Trump and his allies to correct their too early unleashing of their ideologues by becoming more strategic, because they've already given away the game about what they're up to, and because they're incompetent. But that doesn't mean they won't do tremendous damage while they can. And that also, this is really important, that also doesn't mean we can assume that they will fail. It just means that now the possibility of success for us exists. The administration's best hope for continuing their gruesome atrocities and campaign against everyday people is to shut down dissent before the November elections.
Mr. Attorney General, when it comes to these violent groups, the president has said that he wants these groups to be investigated. Can we expect to see more accountability?
There's a good chance that if Blanche is confirmed, we're going to see some big shifts once again.
You see what's happening on TV in New Jersey, you saw it in Minnesota. That's not who we are. Those are not peaceful protests.
So these next 4 months are likely to reveal even more desperate moves from Trump's allies. It's critical that the opposition keep pushing back on these illegal power grabs. And this week, we saw the Supreme Court try to expand Trump's authority over executive branch agencies.
The court upended 91 years of its own precedent, which is no small feat. And this is going to fundamentally reshape the way that presidents have power.
Yet, even with the allowances that they are making almost as quickly as they can find cases to do so, much of what the president is doing is still illegal. The corruption continues to expand daily.
Here's a guy who dumps, tens of billions of dollars into a Trump family cryptocurrency firm. The Securities and Exchange Commission then mysteriously halts its fraud investigation and settles with the guy who just gave the Trump family all the money.
So keep resisting all this becoming normal.
President Trump reported more than $1 billion in income from his family's crypto ventures last year.
Show up for one another. Give to legal defense funds, such as the one on Chuffed for the 15 anti-ICE organizers recently arrested in Minneapolis. Pressure your elected officials to speak on behalf of those detained, whether they're immigrants, protesters, or both. Support publications that report on the rising oppression with real shoe leather reporting on the ground about what is going on, who's getting arrested, who's getting charged, who's getting detained. Speak out with friends and family at public hearings, online and in person, and at demonstrations to show that the right to do so isn't negotiable and won't be surrendered.
Thanks for listening to Next Comes What. Please share this with one person who's looking for ways to survive this mess. To support this podcast, please become a paid subscriber at AndreaPitzer.com and consider giving Next Comes What a 5-star review where you get your podcasts.
And that's it.